Welcome to the InStory show. I'm Devorah Spilman, your host, and today I am thrilled to welcome Karen Curry Parker. Hi, Karen. How are you?
Hi, excited to be here.
So Karen Curry Parker is a best-selling author of multiple books. She's the creator of the Human Design for Everyone training system and the Quantum Alignment system. And she's going to tell us more what that all means. But so Karen, maybe start out, tell us a little bit about what you do now, like what is this world that you are opening up for people, and then talk a little bit about kind of your journey to get to where you are now.
So I think probably the easiest way to define what I do is, first of all, to start with understanding that human design is a synthesis of Eastern and Western astrology, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, Judaic Kabbalah, and quantum physics. But the way I like to describe it, the way I like to describe it is it's basically a Rolodex of ancient and modern archetypes. And really what we do with human design, and it's got astrology in it, so you use your birth date, it spits out a chart, is we look at that chart as a template for your personal narrative, the story that you tell about who you think you are. And what we do is we use the archetypes in the system to help you construct a personal narrative that really is a reflection or a true story. I like to call it the true story of who you really are. And then we look at how can we create strategies to help you step into really living true to that story. That's probably the easiest way to describe that process. And what we do is, in conjunction with that, we use energy psychology techniques, mostly the emotional freedom techniques, to tap away or to clear any trauma that keeps you from stepping into that story. And for me, the definition I use of trauma is any event, perception, or experience that's caused you to lose connection with that true story and with your right place in the world and your sense of value. So it goes beyond the traditional definition of trauma. It's just anything that keeps you from seeing who you are.
I just love that description of how it integrates all of these powerful ancient systems all together in one thing.
Yeah, it's just, like I said, it's just a Rolodex. You just get into the Rolodex and pick out who you are. So
super. So I just love all this stuff. Super cool. All right, so tell us a little bit of your story, because that's always my passion as a storyteller, is the power of our stories, which make us so unique. So when you were a kid, did you have any kind of unique intuitive abilities or awarenesses or anything like that?
yeah, I mean, I think, I work with a lot of clients who I call escape artists. They escape from the cubicle. I never escaped from the cubicle. I started off, I think, actually when I was 4 years old, I have such clear memories of riding in the backseat of my mom's car while she was smoking cigarettes with the windows down, and talking to my spirit guide, Thomas, and Thomas telling me, well, you came here to teach love. That's your job. And, I certainly was an incredibly intuitive kid. I was actually a medium, a natural medium. And so I spent a lot of time talking to dead people that I didn't know were dead. Until one day when I was probably about 5 or 6, we were living in an apartment building that was right next to a train track, and 2 young girls, teenage girls, had been crossing the track and had gotten hit by a train and killed. And in the process of crossing, they came to me in my bedroom, and because I didn't really know what was happening and I didn't know how to interpret it, I got very frightened and had like a sort of a hysterical fit. And my father came in the middle of the night, and this is going to sound so bad, but he didn't mean it in the way that it was experienced. I think he saw me being hysterical and he slapped me in the face. And he didn't slap me to hurt me. He never spanked me or anything. That was probably the only time I remember him hitting me. But I think he just thought, because he'd seen that on TV, that when somebody's hysterical, you slap them. And I remember immediately thinking in my head, well, I'm not going to ever do that again, and just literally shut everything down. So I grew up as a very logical, very scientifically minded person until after I'd had my second child. I was vacuuming. This is my great awakening, happened during vacuuming. I was vacuuming one day. My babies were asleep upstairs, and as I was vacuuming, I ran into a man's pair of shoes, and it was such a real experience. It terrified me because I thought someone had broken into the house. And I looked down, and as I looked, then I kind of saw the shoes, and I looked up, and this young man floated up the stairs to the landing. And he kind of smiled down at me, and I looked at him and I thought, oh my gosh, he looks so much like my family. And he said to me, don't worry, Mom, everything's going to be okay. And then he kind of disappeared. And I knew immediately at that moment, oh, I'm pregnant. And I didn't, wasn't planning on being pregnant at that point. And as it turns out, I was. And I gave birth to this young man who, thank God, told me before he got here that he was going to be okay, because raising this kid was a very big challenge. And we had, from the very beginning of his life, this deep, deep psychic connection. In fact, when he was 2 years old, he wasn't speaking with his mouth. And I literally didn't notice, because we had such a connection. I thought we were talking and that he was talking. And people started saying to me, that's a shame, he's not talking. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? We're having these amazing conversations. He's brilliant. And then I realized he's literally not talking. And, and that was sort of the start of this long journey that I went on to figure out why wasn't he talking. That sort of led to his diagnosis of having Asperger's, and finding energy psychology, EFT, as a way to manage some of his Asperger's frustration, and kind of this whole personal reawakening of my own intuitive abilities from that point on.
What an amazing story.
Yes, that's the tip of the iceberg of the story. It's a very long and weird story, but yes.
Or tell us another little weird piece.
I'll tell you how human design found me, because I don't think I found human design. So
okay, perfect.
I was at the time when I had 4 children at the time. I was a suburban soccer mom, homeschooling my 4 kids. My husband at the time went on a spiritual retreat to Sedona and brought back a human design chart. And I looked at that chart and I just started to cry. I don't know what it was about it, but it was so, like, it was home to me. When I saw that chart, I knew I had to learn everything I could about it. So wow. We literally put the house on the market within 2 weeks. We sold it in 24 hours. We packed up the car and moved across the country to Sedona. When we got to Sedona, my youngest son, had an ear infection. So I took him to the doctor. And I came out of the pediatrician's office with this kid on my hip, and in the door across the hallway from the pediatrician was a door to an office, and on the door was the human design symbol. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go in this door and see what this is. So I opened the door, and it was a very small office, and there was a woman in there sitting behind the desk, and she said to me, oh, did you come for the job? And I said, yes. And she hired me on the spot. So I immediately got a job working for what was at the time the headquarters for Human Design America. And I spent 2 years working for them and studying with the founder of the system before I took off and did my own variation on the training. So even there was magic. There's magic there all the time. And, I certainly would say, for me personally, one of the things that I am the most grateful for in the evolution of my own life is that I have been blessed to just have a phenomenal amount of magic that has always kind of kept me on my path along the way. So that's been kind of fun and exciting.
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how are you helping other people trust this magic? Like everyone has an area where you're just super gifted. It's just your thing. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you try to help somebody wake that up in themselves. And I'm curious, what are some of the ways you're helping other people? And then I want to move into talking a little bit about helping people in our times.
Absolutely. So, I think that one of the beautiful things to me about human design is that at the root of human design is the idea that you are your own authority, that you have within you your own compass that is going to tell you where you need to go, what's right for you, what's your unique way of sort of unwinding or unfolding your life path. And that no one else knows what that is except for you. And it's tricky. It's a little tricky to teach that, because what we see in human design is that when we look at intuition or self-trust or self-awareness, that we're all hardwired differently. Mm-hmm. And that I would say most of us, the biggest challenge is not that we're not intuitive, it's learning how to hear it. And there's an expression that says, it's not the fish who've discovered water, right? And so we're in it, we're very intuitive, we're experiencing intuition because it's so much a part of our life. And I think because we're kind of trained maybe by Hollywood and the whole I See Dead People movie, that we think our intuition is going to be like some giant flaming angel that's going to stand at the foot of our bed saying this way. And in fact, it's really probably a little more subtle than that. And I think in conjunction with that, because we are so deeply conditioned towards the masculine, if I want to say that, and towards logic and reasoning, that if you think about logic and reasoning and recognize that logic and reasoning is at the root of the scientific method, and that the scientific method starts inherently with doubt, right? You have to prove that something is true. We're so trained to doubt ourselves and to doubt our knowingness that isn't quote unquote reasonable or logical, that we don't let ourselves trust our intuition. Honestly, when I'm teaching people to trust their intuition, I'm doing two things. Number one, we're looking at how you're hardwired. In the chart, I can usually pull out what somebody's preferred intuitive channel is, if you will. So whether they hear or whether they feel or sense or know, and there's different ways that intuition works. And then the second thing that we do is we do a lot of checking in and with hindsight, because I do find that the best way to learn to trust your intuition is to do a retrospective. All those times when you were like, duh, I shouldn't have done that, or whoa, why did I do that? I knew I shouldn't do that. You know, it's that hindsight piece that teaches us to reconnect to, well, what did it feel like before I did it? And if I'm going to have that feeling level again, I'm going to have at least enough data behind me to say, this is actually a pretty reliable feeling, and maybe I should experiment with trusting it and see what the outcome is.
I love that, because it's so true that we are, I think schools also, like I love that you homeschooled your kids, like that schools have kind of conditioned people to not trust what your intuition is, but to comply with the expectation and get a right answer.
Right, exactly.
Right, so we haven't been trained, we haven't been taught to value intuition. We literally haven't even been taught about it. And now I think we are in times, not because of the coronavirus time, but because of this opening, the way we have access to each other, that there's a lot more opening and acceptance of new ways of thinking. And it's just more acceptable. And so now, even more now with the coronavirus and everybody having to stay home, the online transformational community is in place.
Right.
We're already in place. Like I was saying, I already stay home.
Exactly. I was watching somebody post about, well, what do you do if you have to work from home? I'm like, how do you not work from home? What does that look like? You know? Yeah.
Right. But I think we're in place. And I've been thinking a lot about like what I call, how do you lead from your lane? Mm-hmm. Meaning, how do you bring wisdom, healing, inspiration, positivity from wherever is your gift, which is kind of what your human design is all about, what my Find Your Story is all about. And what if we tune into that even more so right now, so that we pay attention to what do you listen to? Who are you following? What is your strength? Mm-hmm. Right? Because if I try to teach somebody about something medical, that's not my lane. I could repeat what someone else said. But I can talk to you about sharing your story, about sharing your inner wisdom, trusting your intuition. So that's something that I've been thinking about a lot, is how to support people to lead with their own gifts. And so I would love to hear kind of what are you saying to people now to support them, to give some tools and tips for people to really raise themselves and their communities up now in this time where everything's really different.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, actually, I've been thinking a lot about the coronavirus, and I went back and I did the astrology of the beginning of the pandemic. And, you know, every event brings with it what I like to call a soul curriculum. And there's a curriculum for the virus and for the pandemic. And it's interesting to look at the fact that so much of what this virus has the potential to bring us is the energy of recalibration. That it's really an invitation on a soul level for us to pull back and to clarify for ourselves what is truly valuable, and ultimately, as we retreat, before we reemerge, to really explore how do we construct a collective and a personal vision around those things that are truly valuable to you and begin to live in accordance with those values. So, you know, again, I have to stress, and you and I talked a little bit about this, you know, my perspective is a highly privileged perspective. I am fortunate enough to have the resources to be able to withdraw for a couple of weeks and not worry about money or food. And that is an incredibly privileged perspective. And, you know, it certainly opens up in me an opportunity to explore how can I share what I have, which I believe, you know, really is at the root of abundance anyway. Why bother having extra if you can't share it? It's like, what are you going to do with it? Except move it around and pretend like you're feng shui in your house, right? I have extra, let me move it. But you know, I think that at a different level with this, you know, when we look at the human design chart and we look at the archetypes in the chart and we look at where does the energy for immunity live, for our immune system live, I don't think it's a coincidence that the energy for integrity and the energy for our immune system live in the same place on the chart. Now, when we talk about integrity in human design, I like to sort of break integrity down into 5 core areas. The first area is physical integrity, obviously. So that's making sure that whatever you're doing is going to keep you in physical integrity, keep your body well, keep your physical body, you know, in an optimal state of well-being. The second place where we have integrity is what I call resource integrity, meaning making sure we're not using our resources inappropriately. Sometimes what we see is because our metric of value in our culture right now is so materialistic, we tend to measure our value from our material worth. We're giving up that, hopefully. But really looking at where are we maybe overcompensating for a perceived lack of value by using material resources to try to amp up our self-worth. You know, so we're having this whole exploration around resources and what are resources and how do we use them in alignment with integrity. The third kind of integrity is identity integrity. You know, is there some place in your life where you're showing up out of alignment with yourself because you feel like if you show up as yourself, you're not worthy or you're not valuable or you can't confer value upon yourself for whatever reason? The fourth level of integrity is moral integrity. And that's one that's probably pretty obvious to most of us, but, you know, recognizing that oftentimes we are amoral or immoral in our integrity. Again, when we question our value, we think we can't get what we want in the right way, the correct way, because we don't think we're valuable or worthy enough. So we get sneaky or out of integrity with trying to create what we want or what we think we need. Mm-hmm. And then the last form of integrity is energetic integrity. Where are we committing to energy that perhaps we don't have and blowing our own circuitry, burning ourselves out by pushing too hard, which I think, you know, really to me, this whole thing is a doing detox. You know, we're being kind of forced to not do. And I think that collectively, that's probably the thing we need the most. We need to pull back and we need to rest and we need to create sustainable cycles of rest. I mean, if you don't resource yourself, you won't have resources. If you don't replenish, restock, you know, if you're not doing all the things on a regular basis, you run the risk of being depleted. And when you are depleted, you're not sustainable. And when you're not sustainable, you can't create sustainably in the world. And I really think what the world needs more than anything right now is for all of us to get into sync with how do we create sustainably? Because we are facing potentially with global warming, with transitions that we have in the way the world is working, a potential crisis in resources. And I totally and absolutely 100% know that we can overcome that crisis. I'm not worried about us figuring it out. And I do think that we'll figure it out faster and with a greater degree of compassion and equitability and elegance if we are all creating from a place of self-compassionate based resourcefulness and rest. And you know, if we're not doing that, we're not sustainable. And if you really look at the statistics, you know, the statistics on burnout are mind blowing. And I honestly think, based on the surveys that I've done with the people I work with in my business, that those national or international surveys on burnout are underreported. I really think that probably close to 85 to 90% of us are in some way burned out. And that burnout is going to impact our ability to create the solutions we need to make this world a better place. So I'm all for 3 weeks or more of enforced rest. I think it's a good idea. I think we should have done it a long time ago before the virus, and then we could have had a lot more fun and been a lot less frightened. But, you know, maybe this is what we need, a hard pause to get ourselves back in sync with maintaining and sustaining our own sustainability and redefining what's really valuable.
I really love what you just taught. I love the way you defined those 5 areas, the way that people can assess how are you doing, that we need to reset, re-energize, you know, renew ourselves, all of that. I think that's a powerful teaching, and I encourage people to really like take that in and figure out where can you recharge, where, you know, each person needs to figure out what needs to be strengthened, recharged, healed, both what do you need, and then also obviously what can we give?
Yeah.
Right? Which is what you started with, in a way, is how do you, you know, where do you have, what's your lane for giving and supporting and inspiring other people? And what do you, and asking each person, like, as you take this on, what do you have to teach? Right? Like, I believe everyone who's listening to this series, you're listening because you know you have a calling to something more. Otherwise, you're just not going to be listening to us right now. So that means you have something to say. Look, there are plenty of other things you could be listening to right now. So if you're listening to us, it means that you feel this calling to come forward and make a difference with something essential in you. And we want to give you the encouragement to trust that.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the other thing is, you know, have you ever gone to one of those masquerade parties where you hold a mask up on a stick? You know, it's like, you can't do that all night long. You know, at a certain point, you're like, oh, forget it, you know? And I think that's a really interesting metaphor for how we live our lives. If you're going around holding up this little mask, you know, at a certain point, your arm's going to get tired and you're going to put that thing down. And you know, it takes an enormous amount of energy to try to be something you're not, or try to hide who you are. And if you're not in your right lane, if you're like over in Bob's lane or Jeff's lane or Maria's lane, and that's not your lane, and you're trying to lead from that place, or, you know, first of all, you're not gonna be able to confer any kind of people behind you. Nobody's gonna follow you because they're gonna know you're not in the right lane. And secondly, you're going to exhaust yourself trying to push the car in the lane where you're not going to go. If you get into that right lane, it's like, you know, getting onto the magnetic rail of a high-speed train. Things start to work. Things start to be easier. Things start to be more joyful. And, you know, I'm not going to say, oh, you're going to make more money. You're going to, you know, I'm not going to say that, but you won't care because you'll be so in alignment that the quality of well-being in your life will become the new metric for who you are and your value.
Right, right. Yes, I'll often say that joy is underrated in our culture.
Totally, totally. Yeah, totally.
And I was thinking about that recently. I think it was yesterday, I was talking with a friend about am I allowed to feel joy if somebody else is suffering, or if something didn't work in my business, or if I can't go to work? Like, this idea that we can't feel joy if everything's not perfect. And right? Like, but what if the joy is where we are no matter what? Like, what if joy is not dependent on our external circumstances?
Totally. You know, I always think about Itzhak Perlman, who like took violin lessons as, you know, well into his 80s. It's like, people would say, why are you still taking lessons? He's like, well, I still have more to learn, you know, and it's his joy of this instrument and his mastery that drove this learning process. And never once was there, oh, I got it, I'm done, you know? And I think that's the other part of it, is like this metric of perfection. First of all, let's face it, it's an illusion. And secondly, how boring is that? Like, okay, great, got that done, check it off, now what? It's like, there's a certain essence. And you know, when I teach life purpose, this is a lot of what I talk about, that it's not even so much what you do, it's that you are the purpose. And so the becoming masterful of the expression of yourself is the purpose. And that's where the joy is.
I love that. I love that. It's wonderful. And I think we're in times before, separate from the coronavirus, but times that there is an opening. There really is, that, you know, most of us who are speaking on this series, we didn't always speak so openly about all these topics. And now it's just, there's much more opening. So all of you should feel encouraged.
Yes.
Regardless of these times, you should feel encouraged, or maybe even more so. So in that vein, tell us a little bit about what your free gift is and how they, you know, they'll have a link to get it, but what it is and how they'll benefit from it.
So you, at the moment of your birth, which is a momentous event, you have locked into your energy field a blueprint for who you are that tells you your life purpose, your soul story, your soul curriculum. That blueprint is called your human design. So what I'm going to give your listeners is the opportunity to get their human design chart, their blueprint. And in conjunction with that chart, with that your unique personal chart, you're also going to get a whole series of free reports about how do you live true to who you are and make the right kinds of decisions that will bring you closer to being in alignment with your right work, your right relationships, your life purpose, your lifestyle. How do you find people that support you in the fulfillment of who you are? That's going to come with not only some really great written materials, but it's also got some really good videos to help you sort through and understand what are the parts of this chart, what does this weird little thing mean, so that you can really use this as a good tool to begin the process of really discovering your authentic self. And most importantly, I think the way in which you connect with your own inner authority, so that you can start making choices that bring you more into alignment with living with your authentic self, or as your authentic self.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And it's super cool. You click and you get all this cool stuff that just shows up in your world. It's super cool. And so click the link, get the human design chart, look through it, and then jump into the InStory World Facebook group and share what you got, share any questions. Karen can pop in there too. Okay. And then keep, you know, stay connected with us. We have the live videos in the mornings at 9 and the Facebook group for you. Stay connected and feel this moment of encouragement that you're going to get some information that's going to just give you that little extra clarity and support to trust your own intuition. So as we sort of wrap up, leave us with a few last words of inspiration.
Okay, so I use this a lot, but I think it's a really good metaphor for us to play with right now. You know, I have 8 kids.
You have 8 kids?
Yes, 2 stepdaughters, 5 kids of my own. We've got dogs, we got cats. Puzzles have a very, very short lifespan in our family. If you try to take a puzzle piece and jam it where it doesn't go, or if you're like my youngest son, you rip off all the little nubbins and try to fake its way into being in the right space, it affects the sum total of it affects the whole face of the puzzle. And a puzzle itself is only as beautiful as the sum total of the pieces. We as humanity are very much like that puzzle. Each and every one of us has a unique, irreplaceable, vital place in that puzzle that no one else can fill. And if you're trying to push yourself into a place where your piece doesn't fit, or you've ripped off pieces of yourself to try to jam yourself into a spot that's not yours, not only are you going to be miserable, you're actually going to be affecting the face of the puzzle. The more you live true to your right place in the puzzle, the more you live true to who you are, the more you not only create for yourself more alignment and ease, the more you add to the sum total of the beauty of the pieces and the face of humanity.
Love that. I teach about metaphor all the time. So I just love that you left us with a metaphor, because that is, I think, just in itself, the metaphor is powerful, but the use of metaphor is also so powerful because it has this visceral effect on people. And, and it is that sense that your unique puzzle piece is beautiful and valuable and unique and necessary, and there isn't any other one like it.
Totally.
Right? It's such a great metaphor. Karen, thank you so much. It's just a delight to have you share your wisdom, to share human design. So everybody grab the free gift, share your insights from getting it. And Karen, thank you again.
Thank you, Devorah, and thank you all for listening.
So, and as I always say in farewell, everybody, remember, go out in the world, share your story, live your purpose, and be a blessing. Bye, folks.